And we're live. Hello, Fatí.
Hello, Rick. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It seems like forever that we've,
I know I haven't seen you in what, 2 weeks?
at least, yes, at least,
Right. Right. Did you miss me?
yes.
Oh, okay. So you had to think about it.
No, I didn't have to think about it. No, I
Yeah,
appreciate our conversations every week.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we had some extra conversations in between. So, um,
Yes.
well, welcome back. It's good to see you. I'm
Thank
looking
you.
forward to chatting and diving deeper into this reflection piece that I think it's really, really important, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Touch
And
bases back into what we had shared a couple of weeks ago, and
right.
yeah.
Yeah. And welcome everyone. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Interact with us, show us your love.
Yeah, just say even just say hello, just so we know we're actually talking to somebody. But even it's actually been fun to just to know like doing this as a partnership
Right.
takes a lot of pressure. I've done something similar to this just on my own. Um and there's this, I don't know how radio hosts can do it.
On their own, like
Yeah.
talking to themselves.
Yeah, because that's what they have to do, right? They have to pretend that there's somebody behind out there in the wavelengths to
Right.
listen to. Hey, Angela, good to see you.
Hi, Angela. Good to see you. It's been a while. All right. So, shall
Okay.
we dive a little bit into this? Right. We have talked about a lot of different things. Are you frozen? I'm not seeing.
Um,
Okay. Now you're better.
no, it says I'm unstable, but that's normal.
Your connection is unstable, right?
Oh, right. As you could tell, I'm a little I'm going light right now, so
Right,
I
right.
just I feel very humorous.
So yeah, so let's dive into this. We did a
Okay.
little bit of diving into, looking at my story. We looked at a little bit at your story as well. We looked at, like I think when we tell a story, it's entertaining and it's great, and you can start getting a sense of where someone came from and what has led them to do what they do. But then it's important to also like start taking a bird's eye view and looking at, all these different events, how they have led us to where we are and what do we learn from them. That's really where the learning is, right? That's really where the growth comes from.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know that, I always have troubles with bios,
Right.
even in my website, putting together this about thing, which is supposed to describe a little bit about your background and various other things. But I, you know, and what I tell my clients is the past doesn't define you. It only
Right.
describes things that happen to you. And yeah, there are lessons learned, and that in the moment they don't seem that way, but it's only on reflection, right? So I can see, yeah, if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for everything that I experienced over the years, I wouldn't really be here today.
Right. Right.
But what's really interesting is I didn't plan to be here today either, in the sense of, if you had asked me, a few years ago, so what do you think? Where will you be in 2 years? I said I don't know. Like, I never had a podcast in the
Right.
plan.
Right. I
So
didn't.
what's that?
I definitely didn't. Yeah. No.
No,
Yeah. Yeah.
no. And we talk about this, how spontaneous it all sort of happened. And I just came back from a 2 week vacation, and part of that vacation, in the plan, there's planning, right? There's a little bit of planning involved, right? You have to pack your bags and figure out what you're going to take, and you have to get to the terminal, and there's various logistical things that you have to do. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to keep my plans during the trip very loose. And that was one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the years, is
Right.
not to hold on so tightly to my plans
Right.
that it would upset me if nothing happened.
Right.
And
Because we get attached to the actual plan that we plan. Right.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so it was quite fun, even though part of the party did a lot of planning. Like there's an app that we all shared, and there's the calendar. When you're on a cruise ship, every hour can be filled with something.
Right.
Everything from um, uh, trivial games to karaoke to dance lessons to, you name it, it's all there. And if you want to fill up every hour of your trip, you can.
Right.
Well, I found my calendar quite full, kind of a thing.
Right.
And
Oh my.
so, and it's sort of like, wow, I'm going to be really busy, or not. And I basically said at the beginning, I says, well, really, I have no agenda. Like, I have no must tos. I
Right.
just, let's just get on and just see what happens. It's interesting to note that with all the planning and everything else, even though a lot of it was done in tongue in cheek, because they even booked me in a marriage game. Yeah, no kidding. Eh?
Wow.
And which would have been fun. But even then, as soon as we got on board, the plans all dropped.
Right. Right.
And it was more about, let's just go with the flow. Let's just see what's happening. And I find that more and more, my biggest takeaway over the years is to let loose of my expectations and my plans.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, Deborah, thanks for joining us.
So I wonder, because obviously I'm not going to speak for you, but for me, one of the first times in my life when I realized that the amount of effort that we put into planning and, like trying to control how our lives are going to go and all of that. The first time that complete, it wasn't the first time, but where it really sunk in because I was a little bit older was when I lost my husband, right? When I
Mm-hmm.
was faced with, actually, really, I started feeling that once it got sick, right? When something that you couldn't have predicted comes in and it just requires all your attention, right? And like messes up your plans. And that was really, obviously I didn't completely embrace it initially. It took many years actually to embrace that, right? I can see that today, after doing so much work on myself, after really shifting the way I look at life, right? Really shifting out of victim, right? Shifting out of that and being able to just pause, look at facts and situations for what they were and what has unfolded. And instead of focusing on how unfair they were, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we could sit here and argue that it was really unfair, right? But that's not gonna, right? That just keeps you in a place of feeling victim to circumstances, right? It really is once I have stepped out of looking at life from that perspective that I was able to see how many big lessons were in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some tough ones, right? Some tough ones, some real um, what do we want to call them, wake up calls, right? Like I
Yeah.
really sensed, I touched the fragility of life, right? How much we take that for granted.
Totally.
That people that we love are going to be there and that every day, things are going to stay the same and that we have our health and that we have, a stability and a roof on our heads or a job or whatever it is. And it really is in those moments where those like things that we use to feel stable and grounded, those are being challenged that, everything starts shaking up. And in those moments, even where I'm at today, it sucks. It's not fun, right? No one loves it. No one would intentionally call it in, but it's life, right? And it
Yes.
happens. And the longer you stay just focused on rejecting that something is happening, and the longer you're going to suffer in that situation, right? But when you can really do this exercise of looking back and seeing what has come out of those situations, then that can become an opportunity for growth and a big shift in life. So yeah, I wonder where you have experienced that specifically in your life.
There are so many moments that I would say to myself and my wife, I says, could it get any worse?
Right.
Kind of a thing, you know, and yet here we are, right? Which I think is a testament to the human resilience, the human spirit. There was a phrase that floated around, we've survived every bad thing, or I forget how the phrase went, but every worst case scenario we've already overcome.
Right.
And it just seems like, could it get any worse? And and things like you said happen, right? I didn't plan on losing my job. I didn't plan on getting cancer. I didn't plan on having my parents get ill. But my grounding in understanding that the circumstances don't define who I am. What defines me is from the inside out. Who am I going to be in that moment was far more important than what the actual event was.
Right. Right.
And the more I started to practice about, okay, this is what's happening, and not add a lot of extra meaning, which would be that personal thing like you were talking about, being a victim. Oh, here I am again.
This is happening
to me. Right.
Wow, life, I'm cursed, like.
Oh, totally.
And it's easy to go there. It's really easy
100%.
and normal
100%.
to go there for a moment, right? Yeah. But it's so disempowering. It just really feels hopeless.
Well, not only hopeless, but then what you do is, because our ego works this way, is, okay, I need to solve this situation. Now I'm going to try and change my circumstances so I don't feel this way anymore. And that was just spinning my wheels over and over again until I realized it's not the circumstances. What needs to change is what's inside. How my thoughts are affecting the experience. When that changed, the experience changed, the circumstances changed.
Right.
The event was still the same.
Right.
But I was empowered to act differently, and more possibilities showed up. Different possibilities show up, and that's where the touchstone to miracles. That's when synchronicity happens.
Synchronicity.
Oh, whatever. Hey, come on. I think English is my third language. I'm not sure what the other first two are, but I can't speak them either. But
no, but it's very true, because I mean, within that moment of feeling like everything is falling apart and all this stuff is happening to you, now you're going to believe a story that everything is happening to you, and guess what? Things are going to continue to happen to you, right? Because you are in a position now where that you're not the author of the things that are happening to you, so there's nothing you can do about it, right? You don't even see any other possibilities, because the story is, and the belief is, life is unfair and things are happening to me.
yes,
And more unfair and more things happening to you are created. And honestly, if someone had said this to me while I was in the thick of some of this stuff,
yes,
I really punched them in the face.
oh, totally.
Right? Because it really felt, especially when someone that you love dies or gets ill, and he was so young and all this stuff, like, it is easy to just go into feeling that way. But really what that is anger, right? You're feeling angry about what is happening because it's painful, because it's not what you want in your life, right? But once you shift out of, how can I change the way I feel about this from the inside out, then you start really seeing possibilities that you couldn't see before, and you start experiencing the situation in a different way. And really all that there is to do ahead of that is allowing the emotions that come up to come up and expressing them, right?
Yeah.
Express the anger, express the sadness. But we tend, when we go into like fixing mode, when we go into, like, I'm going to change what's happening on the outside, we get into that fight or flight push mode. And there is no room for processing. There is no room for crying. There is no room for allowing ourselves to feel. Because if I feel it, then, you know, like, I'm basically admitting that this situation is going to take over. Like, we have so many stories around why we're not allowing ourselves to feel things. It's not about crying and it's not about the sadness being present. That's not the thing that we need to go fix. The thing that we need to go fix is really allowing that to express, and then really changing the way we look at it. Well, what am I learning from this and how can I show up differently? And
And
it's by no means easy.
no, 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 no. I mean, that's what we call about the work, right? It's it is uncomfortable. It's because you're changing direction, right? It's like I tell people, like cross your arms, right, and then cross them the other way. It doesn't feel right.
Right.
So we have these habits that are ingrained with us culturally,
Right.
through our influences of our parents and various other things that we came up with it on conclusions. But you're absolutely correct. Like my dad, even my dad, gets mad at himself for getting emotional,
Right.
because that was his culture thing, right? You remember the phrase, "Oh, you're crying. I'll give you something to cry about," kind of thing. It's like,
Right.
it's like as if I need more things to cry about. But that was another good lesson about freeing up the emotion, because it takes, and I heard this today, actually earlier, it takes a ton of thinking to hold back a ton of
The
thinking.
suppression, it actually takes a lot of thinking, a lot of
Yeah.
like coping, all these
Yeah.
coping mechanisms that form around it, that then they become unconscious. They still drain our energy.
Oh, totally. And there's a fight,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And people, I've had clients, talk to me later, and they go, "I can't stop crying. I can't seem to be," and what that is it's just a dam. You've been holding the dam back for so long, the the big fight and the struggle, and now that you've recognized what you're doing and released the dam, you're having this um a detox a
Right.
detox of emotions, and so they're all going to flood out, and eventually it'll all settle, and things will be good again. But in the moment it feels like, oh, I'm losing it. No,
Right.
yeah, you are losing it, but in a good way.
No, yeah, and and oftentimes I think what really helps is to not try to intellectualize why the tears are there. Why am I crying? Right? Because then we get into our heads about why we're crying and then we feel bad about that. There's so much, so much, so much conditioning around all of that. Like
Yeah.
how, whether or not is, okay to cry, whether or not is okay. It wasn't okay for me as a, young adult to be depressed. That wasn't okay, right? As if I had a choice, right, in that. And but the one thing that I would say, looking at this from a bird's eye view, that I'm really realizing, looking at my whole life and all the different events that have led me here, what I'm seeing is a major shift in paradigm has already happened from
Mhm.
when I was a kid and a young adult in my in my teens
Yeah.
until today. How much more open we are about these conversations, and how important it is that we normalize them, right? And that is very much what I see is my purpose, right? Because I've been through all of these things, right? Because of how painful it was, because of how I've experienced them, and because of how I know how unhealthy it is
Hmm.
to suppress them and to just linger in them and to just rehearse and be in that victim mode. Now I can be here and speak about it so openly and help others see things differently, right? So talking about looking back and what have I learned a lot from those
Hmm.
really painful experiences, and I learned that it wasn't all for nothing, because that is also something that I really felt along the way. Like, I didn't really understand why I was going through the things that I was going through. It felt like a waste of a life, a waste of
Yes.
my time, right? But now that I look at it from the point of view that I have today, I really see the huge value that it has had in my life. Like, I really, given the circumstances and given the, my background and the, like this generational stuff happening, that really was the way for me to be able to put the brakes on and like completely shift something. Like, in my case, and we talked about often about whether or not it's necessary to hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
In my case, it was. In my case, it was. That's what led me to change things completely. Many rock bottoms, actually. It wasn't just one,
Yeah.
right? So there was huge value in it. And yes, it is a lot easier, you know, once you're past it to see it this way than while you're in it. But also reminding yourself of that while you do go through, difficult moments can really help you out of those moments a little bit faster. Because, truth be told, like something tragic may happen tomorrow, and we can all sink back into pain and feeling like a victim and feeling like life is hopeless and all of that. And I think that's a natural reaction, right? Maybe that'll be different in like 100 years from now when we'll grow up with different conditioning, right? But it's natural to feel that. It's just how long you linger in that makes a difference, right? And like what your attitude towards it is also, right? So if I'm now angry and resentful that I feel that way, and I'm like trying to suppress it and deny it, then I'm not really allowing it to express, and I'm going into low vibration feelings that are not really helping what is happening, right? Not helping me shift out of it.
And and, and excuse me. And what I noticed also is how I am not present during those other periods. And so being present has really solidified sort of the understanding of how things are working, how my experiences are, because when we talk about being asleep or being awake in transformational work, it's like when we're asleep, we're in the emotion, we're in our past, we're in the victimhood, and we're just running on autopilot.
Right.
But the moment we notice, oh, I'm doing that, or I'm in that. I was telling a client this morning about the minute that we're present, the minute we notice we're present, because you can only be present to notice.
Right.
right?
Right.
Right. So here I am. I notice, oh, I am sad. I'm not making meaning about the sadness. I am just sad. Oh, I'm happy. And I even said that, like to my wife. I remember the other day, I was sitting on the couch and then I said to her, I says, I just had a happy feeling go through me.
Mm.
Right. It's just like I just felt really good. And we don't really question them. But when something bad or something kind of uneasy comes through us, it's sort of like, okay, what the hell's going on now?
Right. Because we were raised, being shamed about
Yeah.
the things, right? So it's like we do that to ourselves.
Yeah. But
We
with
shame
the moment I notice, oh, I'm a little sad right now, it shifts automatically. It
ourselves.
just changes automatically because in the present moment, it's allowed to.
Right. And
So
the thing that I more recently really, really like experienced on my own life, and learned something that intellectually I knew, but I feel like I hadn't done enough somatic processing, right?
okay.
Somatic, it's just you realize how kind of pointless it is after a while to try and intellectualize our feelings and emotions, right? It's important that's an important piece of it. Then that's important to do, right?
Mhm.
At some point to process and understand. what we feel and how certain situations make us feel, right? Process our experiences. But then the body actually releases things in a very different way. And like, there was a lot of relief in just allowing my body to release whatever unstuck emotions were in there, right? Without having to know exactly what it was,
Yes.
right? And the result is exactly what we're trying to achieve through intellectualizing, which is like we want to get rid of it, right? We no longer want to feel that. So we try to do it through the, intellect, but the intellect can only go so far. But truthfully, after doing this somatic work release lately, I feel so much lighter. I feel so much less reactive. Like
Mm-hmm.
things that would normally still trigger me a little bit, that I would get really like upset. Like I've looked at this piece so many times. I've done
Mm-hmm.
so much mindset work and it's still triggering me, right? So I could go there, still. And now it's just disappeared. It's just disappeared because I think it's no longer stuck somewhere in my body, right? And there's so much relief actually not having to go dig and figure out what it was that exactly there. Who cares? It's
Well,
gone.
exactly.
It
It's
was
gone.
garbage.
Yeah.
It's gone. It didn't serve. It was like yucky, like low vibration emotions stuck in my body somewhere that were like creating automated loops of
Yeah.
reactiveness that were not serving me. I don't really even care what they were.
No.
What I care about is how I feel now. So
Exactly.
it's amazing, and I'm not saying this by saying just bypass it, because the
No,
other
that's
way around
different.
doesn't work either. You can't just go do a bunch of somatic release and then you haven't processed things on a mental level, on an emotional level, right, on a spiritual level. And that's a really the biggest lesson that I really learned, even looking back at my own experiences, like within each one of those huge moments, tragic moments, difficult moments, there was always a lesson. There wasn't just a mindset lesson. There wasn't just, about growing mentally. It was growing spiritually as well, And that really is, to me, the most powerful approach that we could take to anything that we do in our lives, like whether it is our own like physical health or mental health, or like just really realizing and that we are layered beings, right? We're not just the body, we're not just the mind, we're not just the spirit, we're all of it. And so the self-care and the best way to take care of ourselves as a whole is to look at all the different parts that make us a whole.
And to note also that because it's in the form, like it has a physical presence, everything that has a physical presence that we can sort of point to, touch, changes. It's in constant change. And the only constant that I'm aware of, and this is the piece, this is the scary spiritual part that people got kind of like, ooh, what's going on here? Is who is that is experiencing? And the more I keep asking that question, the more I keep pointing myself in that direction. Who is being sad? Like we even talk spiritually, right? We say, oh, I am sad. Okay, who is the I that you're referring to? Right, well, that's me. Okay, I am that. Right? When I first heard that years ago, I really couldn't get my head around it. I thought it meant for me to be something. Like, okay, so I will be that. And if I'm that, then I'll be able to, so it was sort of like, let me be first and then I can have and do and all that other kind of stuff. Well, I found it's this extra little layer about, since I don't have any control over what thoughts are embodying in me, then I'm actually this thing called the conscious observer. Like I'm the one that's observing this going on, and I can feel. Does it happen all the time? No. I feel like I'm in the thick of things, but there are many, many times, including quite recently, where there's this detachment It's almost like you're in a movie theater. It's sort of like, oh, this is my crazy life. Oh, cool, right?
Right.
And you accept it as that. So a lot of people are afraid of the word spirituality because they tie it into religion and dogma and all that other kind of stuff. But spirituality means just the formless. What is the formless energy behind our experiences?
Right.
And Rumi, Carl Jung pointed it to, Einstein pointed it to it, Descartes, all the great philosophers all pointed to this formless piece. And the more we ask the question, who am I that is feeling? What
Right.
is that? There's something to explore and powerful in that.
I mean, I find the spiritual piece really gives you a different perspective. I really broad view on life, right? Puts things into a different place and perspective, right? But we're often, like you were saying, well, we're not always there, right? Sometimes we're in our bodies, right?
Yeah,
We came here in this body to experience life through this body, right? So the same can be true for someone who's always on that spiritual level and living life from that. I hate to use the word higher perspective,
no,
but
there's no higher
that's how
perspective.
most people
Yeah,
reference to it, right? The higher perspective. And there's an inability to be in their bodies, to be present with their body, because there's being present with that too, actually feeling your body, right? And that's actually
absolutely.
one of the things that I really learned, like to be more in touch, because that disconnection that you're talking about can happen for people within their bodies too. It happens to me too, it happens to all of us, right? That we're not actually in touch with what's happening in our body. And when we pay more attention to what we are feeling in our body, then it's a map. It's a map. Like our body speaking to us,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And when we feel our body, we stay present with it, that we know exactly what's happening, right? We know exactly when something doesn't feel right. We know exactly when there's a place that we need to pay attention to, right? So again, instead of just being in our heads all the time or being up there, like we're the way I see it is that we are really meant to like roam, like shift from there to the mind to the body. Like it's all of it is being present,
it is. It's that. I know. Sid Banks, the mystic that was living on Salt Spring and wrote a few books that really influenced a lot of my thinking. The missing link being for one. Said that life's a contact sport, and I know he meant it as you're going to get your punches, you're going to get your knocks, and all this other kind of stuff. But somehow I heard it differently. I heard it as we need to be in contact with the physical side of things. Like it's part of us. Like this is the conduit.
Right,
This is us, the spiritual, having the human experience. And it's not a human having a spiritual experience.
right,
So, right. We need these bodies as much as they're going to wear out and eventually, not serve us any purpose anymore. But that's how we interact. It's through our touch, our feelings, our senses, our hearing.
right,
And when we're not afraid of that kind of experience, we can embrace life as it is.
right, right. I mean, there's a lot that like we are here to experience the whole experience, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes we're more attuned to like the I am, right? Like you're saying, and sometimes we're more attuned to our bodies and or our minds. We're just in our heads, right?
Yeah.
And all
Yeah.
of those experiences have value in them. But
It's a whole.
we're really, I mean, think about it. You could be the most enlightened person, but you have no connection with your body. You don't really pay attention to your body. You could be really unhealthy. You could be really overweight. And like all of those things contribute to the experience that you're gonna have of life, right? So if your body is not healthy, it's going to affect your thoughts, it's going to affect your feelings, it's going to affect the way you experience life, right? So we're really here to experience life. And sometimes we're more attuned to the observer. Sometimes we're more attuned to the way our body feels, especially if we're ill, right? That can really take over. And, we can be much more in our bodies in that moment, or we can feel really well. And that can add to the other levels of this experience called the human experience, right?
Yeah. And and there's this notion of like we have two minds that we it's one mind, but we use it two different ways. And we've culturally been sort of brainwashed into the intellectual part, right? Where we have to figure things out more and more. And I was there. And, I would try and think my way out of problems, to think of a solution. And what I realized was that it's very limiting. Like what I know is finite. Like it's limited. I can only what it's only past experiences. That's all I can rely on is my memory. When we get in touch more with the intuitive side, the more creative side, there's what opens up is possibilities. There's this thing called, and I remember the first time it was pointed to me, because I've always experienced it, and people, when I say it, will know, yeah, I've had those experiences in the past, but we brush them off. And what I'm calling is the out of the blue moments, where we are in a relaxed state, whether it's in the shower or driving a car, and all of a sudden an out of the blue idea comes in, which, sometimes is an answer to a solution, or it's sort of like, oh, that's where I left my keys, kind of a thing. We dismiss those as kind of one-offs.
Right. Or we don't hear them flat out, right?
Or we flat out don't hear.
Reason.
Yeah, yeah. But I find them, the more and more I listen, like they're not predictable, but they're very reliable. And the more I'm in tune to pay attention to them, there's an easiness. I find I don't have to figure things out all the time. I don't have to come up with the right answer. I don't need to be doing anything other than following a guidance, following a nudge, see
Right.
what happens, right? And we do this in coaching, right? We remove our agenda and just follow the lead of our clients.
Right. The other thing that I want to point to is that, like within feelings, right? We have this weird relationship with feelings, right? How whether or not we want to be vulnerable and speak about them and like, put them out there, or like flat out just suppress them. But really feelings are the language of your heart too, right?
Yeah.
And your heart is very powerful, right? There's so much research now around how it really like affects the magnetic field around us, right? Energetically, it's basically another brain,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And really feelings is, and being in your body actually gets you more attuned to that part of you,
Yes.
right? And that is such an important part of our experience, right? The more we get attuned to that and the more we pay attention to it and we hear what it is that it needs or is telling us, and the more we can be in harmony with that part of ourselves. And actually, talking about getting a little more woo woo, right? Manifestation, that's really the place where you manifest from. But again, what we want to do is when I intellectualize all of it, right? Pre-plan it and like create it all through our minds. It's really not just through our minds that we create this reality, right? It's through that mind-body connection and how that energetic field gets created. And it does really have a close relationship with our feelings.
Yes. 100%. 100%. Yeah, absolutely. So when I'm going to put you on the spot. So when was there a particular insight or event that pointed you towards that heart-centered type of?
So it's somatic healing. Um, well, I mean, I think that the first time that I started really like realizing this was when I read the book, The Body Keeps the Score,
Right.
which all about trauma, how trauma is stored within our bodies. But like, I feel like I didn't quite understand, like what that meant. But as I was reading the book, I'm like, check, check.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of resonance in a lot of what he was describing in terms of trauma. I came to doing like this somatic work through realizing that I'm just not able to shift some of this stuff through the mindset work, through it, not even just through the emotional work. And then I realized, well, the somatic release is another piece of it. And I just happened to, I think as that awareness came,
Mm-hmm.
the synchronicity happened. I had a breathwork session that just fell on my lap, and I had this massive release. And then after that, another synchronicity a couple of weeks later through a sound bath, where again, there was more somatic release that happened. And another one after that, and through this like really totally 3 sessions, yeah, I feel like I'm in such a different place. Like I'm not, things that would normally like really trigger me are not as, I'm not as reactive to them. And also considering what I'm going through in this moment,
Yeah.
in the middle of a move, I'm in the middle of a lot happening in my personal life.
Yes. Yes.
There's a calmness to me that is not familiar, right? And yeah, and I think it really has to do with stuff leaving my body, like being released out of my body. So there's more room for, like patience and, like processing things, like I have more space within me to.
Well, and that part, I think is really important. Like what you're experiencing, and I have, constantly is our innate wellness and resilience that we have innate. The fact that we have thinking removes us,
Right.
right? And there are several examples, and you talk about manifestation and whether you know that was the key element. The key element for me has always been the letting go of thought, the letting go of a position, whether it's letting go of being a victim in the moment or letting go of I'll just see what happens. I'll just see what happens, you know. And I remember one incident, raising 4 kids. I even in spite of I had like 3 jobs going on, we were paycheck to paycheck. And as a matter of fact, the paychecks weren't even meeting the expenses. And there was a time just before Christmas, and I'm sure I shared this story before because it's but we didn't know like how Christmas is important. How are we going to give gifts, kind of a thing. And I remember just thinking, okay, could it get any worse? It was one of those moments.
Right.
And I just said, you know what? We'll just see what happens. We'll just see what happens. I just let go and carried on. And there was a lightness, like you said. There's a piece of, okay, I don't have to think about this anymore. I don't have to think about it. If we don't get presents, we don't get presents. We'll deal with it. We'll figure it out. It wasn't within a few days, within that week, I get a phone call from a place I used to work at, a bank. And they said, hey, what do you want to do with this uh, savings bond? And I go, what savings bond? Well, I bought a savings bond 10 years ago. Had no idea. I forgot all about it. But it was that week they chose to phone me. Right. And it was a significant amount of money that it got us through into the next year.
Right.
So yeah, right. I have no idea if they're all connected, but it's fun to play that way, right? It's
I
fun
mean,
to say, hey,
do you not? Do you
I
not?
know, but I mean, like I'm saying, like people can go, oh yeah, well that's just circumstance.
You
That's
have
just
no,
you know,
you can't really prove it to the mind 100%, right?
you
But we
can
do
intellect.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
we do know. I mean, I feel like, yeah, one of the things, that I realized was I would like clear things through my mind, but then I learned along the way to pay attention to my body, like, but then there was tension in my body still,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe there was a feeling of sadness, in my chest or whatever, right? Which I would normally just try and address through shifting the way I think about things, but like that lingering feeling would be still within my chest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I started like one of the other things before the somatic, release the breath work stuff that I started like dropping in my field, or like just, in looking at YouTube or whatever, was like how to raise your vibration,
Oh
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's really all energy, right? That's all about the energy. And there was no talk about anything on the mental level, right? And that is very much about paying attention to what's going on in your body, right? And shifting what's happening in there. You can do it through visualizing and through the mind, but like it really comes from picking up the signals through your body that your body's giving you, and shifting them that way. And sometimes that lingering feeling is just calling for a good cry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you let go of knowing why you need to cry and why am I so sad? Oh my God, I'm so depressed. That like this cannot be happening. It's not a good time for me right now. I gotta move. I have all this stuff going on. Like who's got time for, right? Instead of doing all of that, oh, there's some sadness there. Okay, what happens if I pay attention to it and actually feel the sadness? And to be honest, I was shocked at how much time it took sometimes for me to be able to even like shed one tear. Like
Mm.
I realized another thing, that like I intellectually thought of myself as someone who had no problems crying and feeling her emotions, but there was a mechanism within myself that was suppressing that,
Yep.
was
Yep.
not allowing me to shed those tears. And it had to do with, I got so much to do. I got to pick up the kids. I got to do this, right? So that mechanism was very mind running in the background in
Yeah.
my unconscious mind, like subconsciously running. And I was like, oh, wow. I thought I was someone who had no problems crying, being vulnerable. But clearly there were some aspects of my life that I am subconsciously controlling, in order to survive and keep going. And that's actually not healthy, right? And I
No.
realized, yeah, how it was, oh, wow, it's so hard for me to feel this. And somehow, once that awareness came in, then literally I was able to cry, and it wasn't like I didn't spend hours crying, right?
No. 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 You release it and it go.
Years.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And it felt like, almost felt like a pressure cooker that you just lifted the lid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was those few drops that needed to come out.
Yeah.
And and I also want to say, it wasn't just the awareness, it was also putting myself in situations and like, doing things that really promote that. So in nature, like going on a hike and like staying present, and not, even if I go with someone, we do like silent portions, like for about an hour, where a lot of the stuff starts coming bubbling up to the surface. Because there's an energy to, talking about energetic processing, there's an energy to nature, that in intelligence to nature, that once you really stay present and connect to it, really helps you move all this stuff out of your body and process it. I highly recommend it to anyone. So oftentimes that happened that way.
You again, we're pointing back to the present, being
Right,
present, right?
right.
And so what came up this morning in a conversation was this notion. I was talking about how I have conversations with people, and I was saying, like, like I don't want an agenda. I don't want to lead a conversation. I want to follow the conversation, right? So I want to, I want to hear more than what I want to speak. Having this conversation, what I'm hearing is I actually do that a lot in just my physical presence too. Like you talk about listening to your body. Like I could I can try and lead myself through my life and keep bumping into things.
Right.
Or I can listen and follow the gentleness, the wisdom, the nudges, right? The nudges that say, hey, I think it's time for a walk. I think it's time to leave the computer right now. I think it's time to whatever. And follow those rather than trying to, okay, I'm really struggling right now. I've got so much to do. I've got to think, okay, what's the plan of action here? When in fact, all I really need to do is pay attention to the fact that I'm feeling this way and then allow that feeling and then just to see what occurs to me to do next, which might be, oh, let's go get a cup of coffee, kind of a thing.
Well, just step outside for a walk, whatever that.
Whatever it is, like not as a strategy, but whatever moves you. And this is what I'm finding more and more of. Yeah, a lot of times it does lead me outside. A lot of times it leads me to doing something totally different, like distracting myself, right? Our bodies, and this is from that book too, is has a high intelligence that when we pay attention to it, it will give us what we need. It will tell us what we need to do.
I mean, if you think about the fact that your body is keeping you alive since day one, beating without you having to do anything.
Exactly.
How can it not be intelligent?
Exactly.
The conditioning around it, like we're so blindsided to the truth that's like we're embodying that truth. This body is keeping us, is like digesting food, is regenerating at all times.
Miracle.
It's a
We're a
miracle.
testament. I
It's
know.
a miracle. And we're like, we're not gonna trust what that our body's giving us a signal. Like, yeah, because this muscle up here has been so overworked that we lost sight of everything else, just as well as we have lost sight of the fact that really paying attention to our lives and our personal lives, our personal needs is the thing that's going to empower you to show up differently in doing your job and creating things and everything that you are like conditioned to think that's a priority above all, right? So I'm going to sit in front of this computer and push and get into that like doing, because then I'm going to get this done. I'm going to create this business. I'm going to make money, right? I'm in that energy of doing and pushing, right? And I'm dismissing all these other things that really, truthfully, are there to help me live more empowered, help me show up more powerfully, right?
We were created that way. I mean, our ancestors, they were counted on everything as right. They used every piece of us to survive,
Right.
and we've just culturally pushed all that away. And no, we're going to be. You got to be smart enough. You got to, intelligence. You got to figure things out. You got to gather knowledge. All this kind of knowledge is power. All this kind of stuff.
Titles and
We forgot.
Business success. Yeah.
We forgot how to really survive. And when all of that is gone, that's what we'll be left with. We'll be left with back trusting, right? Trusting our instincts. This doesn't feel right. Those kind of things, right? So,
we're gonna be left with with the memory of the experience, how we have experienced life, right? Because I mean, this is no news to anyone, right? Business success is not gonna create happiness. Money is not gonna create happiness. But when you experience life from a place of fulfillment and happiness and presence, that's what you're gonna remember, right? And those were probably like talking about the lessons learned, right, along the way. When you're faced with death, when you're faced with loss, when you're faced with living the rest of your life without someone that you love, you're not going to really think about how good of a job they had or like how much money you had. You're going to think about what they left, the experiences that have left you with, what they made you feel, right? And so to think that we can just bypass our feelings or like suppress them and not acknowledge them and not be connected to that part of ourselves is really denying who we are. As is really denying the experience that we're here to have, right? Because what we are chasing is the feeling. What we are chasing is
100%. Every patient complaint that I dealt with as a paramedic was not that he put the Band-Aid on wrong. It was how the paramedic made the patient feel.
right.
That's what they remembered. They remembered the warm blanket, the calming conversation. They don't remember how the treatment went, right? So that I remember that early in my career. It's, you treat people right, you can never go wrong. It's just, people want to be heard. The feelings are far more important than any skill set that you have. And we just sometimes forgot how to be human.
Yeah. We often forget how to be human, and we deny a part of ourselves. We deny a part of ourselves. There's so much conditioning in it, and even the awareness of it sometimes is not enough to override a program that's been there
No.
for sometimes almost our entire lives, right?
Well, or even intergenerational, like, past,
Intergeneration.
right? I mean, we can get into past generations things too, like the sins of our fathers, right? But we're at the top of the hour again. And once again, we fill an hour.
We do. We always do.
Yes.
It's super easy to do. I wonder, someone has any questions. We have like a few more minutes. And if not, I will be happy to see you again next week.
Yes.
It was an awesome conversation. Again, my friend, always so insightful.
It's
And
fun. It's fun because we learn from each other. Even, it doesn't matter how many years of, and this is why I talk about, there's no learning curve in this work. It's insight by insight. It's realization. That's the levels that we're talking about. Right. So it's, yeah.
But also what we just did today, this ability to really look back and see what you have learned and how you have evolved is such an important part of it, right? Because it's not just about, when we just like keep going, we're just paying attention to the last experience, the last thing, that the latest insight that we've had. But when you do this exercise of looking at the whole thing, at the whole picture, and how you've gotten here, and how it's all like stacking up on top of each other along the way, then now you even get reminded of things that you forgot about, right? And you get a sense of moving forward instead of stagnation, and like, things are not happening fast enough, no, we've gone a long way. I personally see my life as that, and I think
100%.
For everyone.
And there's a long more to go. Right?
Yeah.
There's many blank pages of the chapter, like have to be written. And so the work is never done.
I mean, maybe this is something that we could talk about. Let's just come up with a different word for the word work, right? Because work has almost, we talked about labels.
It's a 4-letter word.
It's got a heavy feeling to it, right?
Yeah.
It's just really about living life, and like living life in a, with presence and awareness. That really what it is. And it does take a little bit of work, right? Until we find a new word for it.
Okay. You betcha. Anyways, you have an awesome week, and we'll talk
to you.
Yeah. If you like what's happening, please subscribe, share us with your friends and family, and
help us spread the love and amplify the impact. These are important conversations to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen to the podcast when it drops. Bye, everyone. See you next